you said that you were given a fair bit of creative freedom to reinvent this story. But having said that, did you also feel there was some pressure because
Oh gosh,
you're
yes.
being compared to the original, which was a classic, and so the pressure to stay true to that.
And a classic Australian book. A well-known, well-respected, archetypal Australian book. Almost, like it's the definitive outback horror. Until Wolf Creek came along, that was it. So there was a lot of pressure, but you just can't worry about it, you know.
I think
Is
if you, I think if you are modernizing a book that's written in the 60s, there is going to be that need to bring some female characters into it because a lot of them they were the bit part written
Yeah.
in, I remember, I think I've mentioned it before in the podcast, reading Asimov's Foundation,
Mm,
and there
mm.
was no female, well, there was one, queen, and that's it. And then you see the adaptation that they do in, sort of more modern adaptation, and there's hundreds of female characters in it, and you're like, whoa, what happened to the
Where did they come
original
from?
story? Yeah, where the hell do they come from? So, but
Yeah.
it's when you read it and you go, wow, bringing it into this current sort of present day and seeing the lack of female characters is, quite stark.
Yeah, and it wasn't a great world for working women in 1961 Australia. I don't think the
No.
opportunities were quite as broad as they should be, and probably still are not. So we try and redress these things, but it's doing it with an awareness of where we would like to go, of where we are, where that was, but also going, okay, that might have been what it was then, but there's something about this that needs to be preserved. So how do we add these extra things or adjust these things without ruining as much as possible the core essence of the piece?
Yeah.
What is it? And that just comes from reading and rereading something and understanding it intimately, but also responding to it. I would hate to try and do an adaptation of something that I didn't like. I think that would be really hard to just do a gun for hire job and go, okay, here's a bodice ripper, do a film adaptation of that. It'd be like, but I don't like it. So I don't care what's important or special about it.
Yeah.
So I think that there is a degree of whatever you're spending your time on, there has to be something about it that excites you or gives you some joy. Otherwise, it doesn't. It shows. It shows on the page. It shows on the screen when when you're phoning it in. And I'm sure we've all seen films where it just looks like paint by numbers. The acting, the actors aren't enjoying it. The writer didn't enjoy it. The director didn't enjoy it, and it's just it's a grind.
Yeah.
So with this, I was very fortunate. It was a challenge to rise to. In some respects, maybe we met it, maybe we didn't. I don't know. That's for other people. I did the best I could. There are a lot of compromises that had to be made for time and budget. There always are.
So as the writer, what's your involvement in the actual production of the film? Are you on set?
No, I wasn't. It was shot in Broken Hill, and at the same time that I'd finished writing Waking Fright, I think I was having to write a feature called Australia Day, which was commissioned by Foxtel. So I basically just did that and then went straight on to the next job. I would have loved to. I did go to one day on set in Sydney when they were filming at jail in Parramatta, I think. So I did at least get to meet, some of the, David Wenham and some of the other cast. But it was really like, who's that? I don't know.
And so the finished product, how
Yeah.
close to what you imagined or envisaged? Obviously, the director has got also scope to make changes to the screenplay.
Absolutely, and and a strong director with very definite ideas about what to do. I was very happy with the principal casting of it, and I think that's the biggest battle. I think as a writer is being able to go, well, I've seen this character in my head, and now you're putting this living person into that role. If if it doesn't resonate, then it's like, you know, that's really bad. And I've certainly had that where people have been cast in a role that I've written, and it's like, who cast that? That is really not right. But in this case, I thought the cast were great. You know, Gary Sweet was great. David Wenham was great.
Do you get any control over that at all or not?
No, not in that case. But, you know, subsequent to that, you know, I have, alongside my business partner, Lee, we have formed our own production company for that very reason, so that with what we're writing now, we can actually have quite a bit more say about, you know, who we cast, who's directing it, who's editing it, all of those sorts of little decisions, which, you know, it's difficult with novel writing. There's no one to blame but the novelist. But with screenwriting, bad acting can look like bad writing. Bad directing can look like bad writing. In the same way, great acting can look like great writing, even when it's not. You know, so there's a lot of smoke and mirrors. So
I think Lee Child would have had a few issues with Tom Cruise being put in as Jack Reacher.
just a little on the short side. I mean, I thought he was great. If you hadn't read the books and you just watched it, you go, that's jolly great. You know,
yeah,
but if you read the books, you just go,
at least with the new series,
the new series, he's so much better.
Yeah, there's enormous bloke with massive biceps, and he fits the profile as described in the novels.
He is Jack Reacher for sure, and you know, it's you know, there is a degree where you can deviate, but there's always a line where you go, okay, there are fans, we need to keep happy. And look, so you know, I haven't done any adaptations since. We've certainly toyed with adapting my novels, and we have another Australian novel that we have optioned, which is a lot of fun, which we'd like to adapt. It's a completely different genre. It's a kind of I guess it's a caper comedy, but you know, this is the era of IP in television. If you've got IP on a well-known or even a not well-known book, you know, it seems to put the production leaps and bounds ahead of something which is written from, you know, made from whole cloth. So it's strange times, and television is going through some enormous changes in the same way that publishing did, as we were talking about earlier. You know, when it went from you know, physical bookshops to online to Kindles and wherever we're at now. Television is like that now with the streaming services. You know, when
for choice.
Well, a bit too much, and this is the problem. There's so much competition now. You know, once upon a time it was HBO and Netflix and not much else, and now there's so many other streaming services, and people will just hop between them. I'll subscribe. I'll do it myself. I'll subscribe for 30 days and then I'll cancel after I've seen what I want, and I'll move on to something else. That's how do you sustain that as a business model? And no one's got the answers, and that's why, you know, there are big streamers laying off people by the hundreds right now, because it's an industry in flux. But people will always want to watch stuff. There'll always be a hunger for content, and there'll always be people who want to read. Thank God.
You
know, we love readers. We love their appetites, and we just got to be there to service them and write what we love, and hope that they are also going to love it. What else can you do?
I have to say, after reading, I when I discovered you were coming onto the podcast, I read The Broken Ones, and you've got a lot of similes that you use. I have to ask, do you write them as you're going, or do you have to? For what I do is I get to a point, I know I want to put a simile, and I put square brackets with simile in there, and I'll come up with it a few days later or weeks later. I'm like, oh, there, that one of them works. But do you just write them as you go?
I write as I go, yeah, and you know, probably overuse them, but you know, this is you know, we're all still learning. Everyone's still learning to write. I'm still learning to write. I still feel a novice in lots of respects, just not in comparison to others. But, you know, to the standards to which I hold myself, I never meet them. I always hold myself to a higher standard than I'm able to achieve. And I think that's probably a good thing, as long as it's not so high a standard that you go to bed depressed. But no, I absolutely do that. I'll write a placeholder. If I'm in a scene, certainly with television, if I'm writing a scene and I don't know how to crack it, I'll just write something happens here with an asterisk. And then I'll move on to the next, because momentum, we've got to be sharp.
Yes, yeah.
Because if you don't keep moving, it's like, you know, driving through sand, you get bogged and then you don't move. And then you're a Eeyore for everyone around you, and your significant other doesn't like you, and your kids hate you, and you're just horrible.
I've just got some questions. I know time is running out, and you've been very generous with your time. I've got some generic questions. One question that I'd really love to ask around the adaptation from novel to screenplays. I know a lot of stories that end up on screen start out just as screenplays, and they're destined for screen from day one. Others, of course, adaptations of novels. Examples of more recent successes of adaptations from novels, so Jane Harper's books with you know, Eric Bana coming in and The Dry and subsequent books that have been converted to film. You've got, of course, Trent Dalton, his stories. You've got Chris Hammer's story. Scrublands was another recent series. So they're three that I can think of off the bat. But my question to you is, obviously, because they're very well-established authors, their novels were very successful and I suppose were attractive for conversion to screen. But my question to you is, are they the exception rather than the norm? So for those budding novelists out there, all of us as novelists, if you ask us what's our ambition or our dream is always, I'd love to see my book on screen. But is it the case that generally, so you as a screenwriter, particularly with your own production company, you probably already have your own bank of screenplays. And so is it a case that you're not really looking for new material? You're not really looking at novels unless you said there is a novel that you are looking at converting. So what is the reality? So if, you know, in terms of giving advice to novelists out there, in terms of what is the likelihood of someone picking up your novel and considering adaptation to screen?
Look, it's difficult. I certainly am involved in when I can be with the Queensland Writers Centre. They have an adaptable program, which is great. The caveat to all of it is that it's called the entertainment business for a reason. You know, it is business. It's about making money. These streamers and studios and everything, ultimately, they are answerable to shareholders. And the reason I think that a lot of IP sourced material is finding its way on screen is that it offers the investors a parachute. It says, well, you know, this isn't just coming from nowhere. This is based on a successful novel. So there is a safety net there, which says that this work has already gone through a rigorous beta testing through, you know, being read by the public as a novel, and it's got a tick of approval. So adapting it is a safe bet. Whereas if it's an unknown novelist or an unknown novel, it doesn't give any more advantage or security to the investors than something which is bespoke written, you know, a screenplay that is just written, you know, cold. So it is very difficult, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try, because it's about the idea. You know, it's about getting someone excited. For us, we're a small production company, and we don't have the hundreds of thousands of dollars that some of the bigger production companies have, and readers who are able to option, you know, and say, okay, well, we'll go to, you know, the lovely Josh Kumari or someone like that and say, you know, here's $10,000, we'll option your book for 12 months and see if we can sell it in. We just don't have you know, 5 figures floating around loose change to just go and grab a few options. We'd love to, but you know, we can't. So instead we just write what excites us. And I know that there are a lot of other small production companies that do the same. It's not about the safety net for them. It's about, well, how do we make something that's interesting and fun? Because it's a long process. Writing a book takes many, many months. Making a feature film or a TV show takes years. You know, it can be a year in development and then a year in production and post-production. It can be 2 years straight away. A feature can take 3 years. So if you don't love it, if it's just business for the creatives, then I think you're in it for the wrong reasons. So if I was a new novelist and had a manuscript, I think that finding ways to get to producers with whom you have an affinity. So don't just cold call everyone. Look at what they've made. And if you like what they've made and you think they'll like what you've written, find a way to get in touch, because it's like real estate, like we were talking about, Jack. You know, if you've got someone who wants to sell a house and someone who wants to buy a house, all you need to do is get them together. So if you can find a means to get, you know, a novelist who wants to get this adapted onto the screen, and you've got a production company that wants interesting new material, find that common ground. And it might be something like the QWC's adaptable program, or it might just be turning up to other things. You know, look, you know, go to the state funding body if you're in Screen New South Wales or Screen Queensland or Screen West. Turn up to the events, get on their mailing list, find out what's going on, and turn up. And don't be shy. I learned that from, you know, going to see that publicist. If you don't ask, you don't get. I can assure you that unless you are, you know, Trent Dalton, people are not going to be, you know, waiting for your arcs to come out and trying to get a pre-release version to read before anyone else does. If you're at that level, you've got to do the hustling. Tough, but it's always been tough. And it always probably will be tough. I mean, the writing's hard and the selling's hard. It's just hard. You got to love it.
Yeah. And finally, advice, I guess, for people who've written manuscripts with the view of publishing a novel. There's a lot of information out there. I don't know whether there's so much information out there, say, for screenwriters. So if you're what would be your advice for someone who's got a completed screenplay, they're ready to go, they're wanting to pitch it? Is the process similar to a completed manuscript, or would you say the approach and the process might be a little bit different for someone who's specialized? Maybe they've learned how to write a screenplay, and that's, you know, as opposed to someone who's written a novel, they're thinking, well, you know, getting that in print is my end game, but it would also be nice to have it on screen. Whereas a screenplay, that's, you know, that's your end game.
Yeah.
What would be your advice for a screenwriter to try and get it in front of someone that might be able to, you know, sort of might take interest in it?
I think it's the same thing. I think it's about going, well, I need to know what my work is. You know, what is it, a genre or cross genre? If it is, what sort of does it fall under? Is it Australian? Is it international? Is it sci-fi? Where does it fall under? And then start looking on the platforms on which that kind of, you know, work is released. If it's romance, it's the Hallmark network in the States, or it's sci-fi, or it's high quality drama, it's HBO or whatever. Or it's, you know, it's got a really strong multi-ethnic propulsion to it. So maybe it's an SBS project. So look at first where it would find a home, ideally. If it was made, where would it end up? And then reverse engineer, look at what's screening on those networks, and look at who is making that material. Which production companies are making it, who's producing it, and just start getting in touch. If you've got an agent, that's great. Usually the production companies have a little info and you just have to send that and go, I am a novelist, I've written this, I love this project that you did. Can I get on a call and introduce myself? And then follow up and follow up. And sometimes it takes a long time. We'll send stuff into a network, and it'll be 3 months before it's read, or more. It's slow going, but I think, and I imagine you both will agree, resilience is an incredibly important characteristic to have if you're a writer. So you've got to
absolutely
you've got to have that resilience and apply that to with that what we're talking about, that faith in the work. I love it. I believe in it. And you can't half sell something. You got to go, this is great. You're going to love it. Have a read. Here's the first chapter, or here's the first 10 pages. Don't send the whole thing if you don't have to. I mean, it'd be great if you do. I always say to my production partner, let's send the screenplay, because that's what it is. Don't send the 1-page synopsis, because that's just, it's like reading a review. It's not the execution. It doesn't give you tone and all the fun dialogue and all that, which only the screenplay can do. So you just got to hustle. It's horrible. I don't know what the shortcuts are, but try and find some allies, because doing it alone is really tough. So that ally might be your agent if you're lucky enough to have one. If not, do what we were talking about. Turn up to those state screen body events and make a nuisance of yourself until they introduce you to people. Because honestly, being keen is a great characteristic. You want someone, if you're going down in the trenches with someone for 2 or 3 years, you want someone who's energetic and excited about the work. So be that person.
Be that person. And that golden piece of advice might be a brilliant way to end, because I know, again, your time is precious, and you do need to get away. I'm aware of that. But look, thank you so much, Stephen. It's been so insightful, and I'm really confident that people, whether you are budding novelists or screenwriters, will get a lot out of the advice that you've given us today. So thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you both for inviting me aboard. It was fun.
Thank you very much. It's been great.
All right. Well, look, we will wrap up there. No doubt we'll continue to stay in contact. And I think I'll take on that piece of advice and just be a nuisance. And I've actually got a pitching opportunity at GenreCon next week. So I'll take that on board. I'm gonna be a pest.
Perfect. Be a pleasant pest.
Pleasant pest. All righty. Well, we'll wrap things up, and thanks so much. I hope everyone has enjoyed this episode of the Genre Fiction Podcast. We'll see you next time. All the best. Bye-bye.